Back in the 1980s, comedy had no breaks. Jokes were louder, crazier, and way more reckless than anything you'd see today. Studios took wild risks, comedians crossed every line, and somehow these movies still made it to the big screen. But then, things changed. So what happened to the films that were too rude, too risky, or just too unhinged for modern times? Why were they buried, ignored, or flat out erased from the spotlight? Today, you're diving into 15 wild 1980s comedies Hollywood tried to erase. Get ready for shock laughs, awkward moments, and movies so bold they still make people uncomfortable. 15. Amazon Women on the Moon. This movie feels like a loud channel surfing fever dream from the late 80s. Amazon Women on the Moon is not one story. It is dozens of short sketches smashed together, jumping from fake commercials to strange sci-fi jokes to awkward social satire. That wild structure was the whole point, but it also became the problem. Audiences walked in expecting a normal comedy and instead got chaos. The humor was fast, absurd, and sometimes mean, which confused people even more. Critics did not know how to review it, and studios did not know how to sell it. As tastes changed, the movie slowly disappeared from theaters and TV schedules. Some sketches aged poorly, others still feel sharp and clever. Hollywood quietly stopped talking about it, leaving it to late-night cable and cult fans. It stands as a perfect example of how bold 80s comedy could be too strange to survive the long run. 14. Moving Violations. Moving Violations is pure 80s silliness built around one simple idea: a group of bad drivers forced into traffic school. The setup promised easy laughs, goofy characters, and harmless fun. What it delivered was exactly that, but nothing more. The jokes were loud, broad, and very much of their time. Critics brushed it off as forgettable, and audiences quickly moved on. Without big stars or a shocking hook, the movie vanished almost as soon as it arrived. Studios stopped rerunning it, and video stores pushed it to the back shelf. Compared to other comedies of the era, it had no edge and no lasting catchphrases. That is why Hollywood let it fade away without a fight. Today, it feels like a snapshot of 80s comedy filler, made to fill screens rather than make history, and then quietly erased when tastes shifted. 13. Club Paradise. Club Paradise tried to mix island vibes with big comedy names, but the result felt lost from the start. The movie follows a doctor who escapes his stressful life to open a resort on a small Caribbean island. On paper, it sounds fun and carefree. On screen, it turns messy fast. The jokes never fully land, and the story keeps drifting without a clear direction. Even with a strong cast, the humor feels tired and unfocused. Critics were harsh, and audiences did not connect with it. After its release, the film quickly slipped out of the spotlight. Studios stopped promoting it, and television reruns became rare. Over time, Club Paradise turned into one of those 80s comedies people barely remember unless they stumble across it by accident. It represents how a relaxed idea and famous faces were not enough to survive the changing comedy landscape. 12. The Toy. The Toy is one of those 80s comedies that makes people uncomfortable today. The story centers on a wealthy child whose father buys him a grown man as a plaything. At the time, the movie was marketed as harmless fun, but the concept raised serious eyebrows even back then. The humor leaned heavily on exaggerated situations and awkward power dynamics. Some audiences laughed, others felt uneasy, and critics were divided. As years passed, the central idea became harder to defend. Studios quietly pulled back from promoting it, and the movie slowly disappeared from regular rotation. While it once drew crowds, its reputation aged poorly. Hollywood did not officially ban it, but it was clearly pushed aside. The Toy now stands as an example of how 80s comedy often crossed lines that later generations refused to ignore. 11. Caveman. Caveman is a strange experiment that fully embraces silliness. Set in prehistoric times, the movie uses grunts, physical comedy, and visual gags instead of normal dialogue. That bold choice made it stand out, but it also limited its appeal. Some viewers found it charming and playful, while others found it childish and dull. Critics were not impressed, calling it thin and repetitive. Without strong word of mouth, the film faded quickly after release. Studios did not see long-term value in it, so it was rarely rerun or reissued with care. Over time, Caveman became a curiosity rather than a classic. It shows how 80s comedy sometimes took huge creative risks, even when those risks led straight into obscurity. 10. Caddyshack. Caddyshack II is often remembered as the sequel that should never have happened. The original film became a comedy icon, but this follow-up missed nearly everything that made it special. Many original stars were gone, replaced with new faces and weaker jokes. The humor felt forced, and the spirit of chaos was replaced with safe, dull setups. Critics were brutal, and audiences agreed. The movie failed to make an impact and quickly earned a reputation as a disappointment. Hollywood wasted no time distancing itself from it. Reruns were rare, and the film became a cautionary tale about chasing past success. Caddyshack II did not just fade away, it actively hurt the legacy of its predecessor and was quietly buried as a result. 9. Weekend at Bernie's. Weekend at Bernie's is one of the strangest hit comedies of the 80s. The entire movie hinges on two friends pretending their dead boss is still alive. Instead of treating that idea seriously, the film leans fully into absurd physical comedy. The corpse is dragged through parties, beaches, and public places, all while people somehow believe he is fine. Audiences laughed, but critics were horrified. Many felt the joke went too far and stayed there too long. Still, it made money, which confused Hollywood even more. Over time, attitudes shifted, and the humor started to feel uncomfortable rather than clever. Studios slowly stopped promoting it, and it faded from mainstream conversation. What once felt daring became awkward. Weekend at Bernie's survives mostly as a pop culture reference, not a celebrated classic. 8. Bachelor Party. Bachelor Party captures the wild excess of 80s comedy in its purest form. The story follows a groom whose friends throw him a night that spirals completely out of control. Every scene pushes boundaries with outrageous jokes, chaos, and shock humor. At the time, it felt rebellious and fun. Critics dismissed it as crude, but audiences showed up anyway. As the years passed, that same humor became its downfall. Many jokes aged badly, and studios became less eager to spotlight them. Television edits stripped it down, and full versions were quietly sidelined. Hollywood did not erase it overnight, but it stopped celebrating it. Bachelor Party now feels like a time capsule of a no-limits era that the industry no longer wants to fully claim. 7. Police Academy. Police Academy started as a surprise hit built on silly voices, slapstick humor, and cartoonish characters. The first film felt fresh and playful, mocking authority in a harmless way. The problem came with what followed. Sequel after sequel flooded theaters, each one louder and weaker than the last. What began as fun slowly turned into a parody of itself. Critics grew harsher and audiences lost interest. Hollywood kept pushing until the joke was completely worn out. When the franchise finally stopped, studios moved on fast. Reruns became less common, and the early films were lumped in with the later failures. Police Academy shows how overexposure can erase goodwill and turn a beloved comedy into a forgotten relic. 6. Soul Man. Soul Man is one of the most controversial comedies of the 80s. The plot centers on a student who darkens his skin to qualify for a scholarship. Even at the time, many people were uncomfortable with the premise. The film tried to sell itself as social commentary, but the humor relied on stereotypes and shock value. Critics were harsh, and debates followed its release. As culture changed, the movie became nearly impossible to defend. Studios quietly stopped airing it, and it vanished from major platforms. Unlike other comedies that simply aged poorly, Soul Man became something Hollywood wanted to forget entirely. Its disappearance feels intentional, driven by discomfort rather than nostalgia. 5. Revenge of the Nerds. Revenge of the Nerds was once celebrated as an underdog story packed with outrageous humor. The nerds were framed as heroes fighting back against bullies. Audiences cheered, and the movie became a huge success. Over time, however, people began re-examining the jokes and actions of the characters. Scenes once played for laughs started to feel deeply troubling. What was meant to be empowering suddenly looked irresponsible. As conversations around consent and behavior changed, the film's reputation collapsed. Studios reduced their presence, and praise turned into silence. Revenge of the Nerds remains one of the clearest examples of how shifting values can completely rewrite the legacy of an 80s comedy. It actively hurt the legacy of its predecessor and was quietly buried as a result. 4. Porky's was loud, crude, and completely unapologetic. When it first hit theaters, it shocked audiences with its non-stop sexual jokes and rebellious tone. Teen viewers loved how it pushed against authority, while critics slammed it for being tasteless. Despite the backlash, it became a massive hit and even spawned sequels. Over time, though, the very humor that made it popular turned into its biggest problem. Many scenes aged poorly, especially those built on humiliation and objectification. As standards changed, studios became uncomfortable promoting it. Television airings were heavily edited, and full versions slowly vanished from regular rotation. Hollywood did not celebrate it anymore, choosing distance over nostalgia. Porky's now sits in an awkward place, remembered more for controversy than comedy, and quietly pushed aside by the industry that once embraced it. 3. The Last American Virgin. The Last American Virgin looks like a typical teen comedy, but it hides something far more emotional. The story follows a kind-hearted outsider who falls for a girl he cannot truly have. Instead of a happy ending, the film delivers heartbreak and realism. That choice stunned audiences expecting easy laughs and feel-good closure. Critics were unsure how to label it, and viewers left theaters confused and quiet. The movie did not fit neatly into the comedy box Hollywood wanted to sell. Without a clear identity, it struggled to find long-term support. Over time, it faded from mainstream memory. Studios rarely promoted it, and it never received the nostalgic treatment given to other teen films. The Last American Virgin was too honest for its own era, and that honesty made it easy to forget. 2. Ishtar. Ishtar became famous for all the wrong reasons. The film follows two terrible lounge singers who stumble into international espionage. What should have been light comedy turned into a production nightmare. Reports of massive budgets and chaotic filming dominated headlines before release. When it finally arrived, critics attacked it mercilessly. Audiences stayed away, already convinced it was a disaster. The jokes never got a fair chance to breathe under the weight of bad press. Hollywood quickly labeled it a failure and moved on. For years, the movie was used as a warning story about excess and ego. Studios avoided re-releases, and their reputation froze in place. Ishtar was not just a flop. It became a symbol of everything Hollywood feared repeating. 1. Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck stands as one of the most baffling studio comedies of the 80s. Based on a comic character, the film tried to blend science fiction, satire, and family-friendly humor. Instead, it landed in an uncomfortable middle ground. The jokes were strange, the tone was confusing, and audiences did not know who the movie was for. Critics were ruthless, and the box office collapse was swift. Despite heavy studio backing, the film became an instant embarrassment. Hollywood reacted fast, burying it and avoiding mention for years. Merchandise disappeared, sequels were canceled, and the character was shelved. Howard the Duck became the ultimate example of how a big idea can crash so hard that the industry pretends it never happened. So now that you've seen just how wild 1980s comedy really was, here's the big question. Were these movies unfairly erased, or did Hollywood have a good reason to hide them away? If even one of these films shocked you, made you laugh, or had you saying, "No way they made this," hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm you want more bold, uncensored movie history like this. Don't forget to subscribe for more forgotten films, risky stories, and the kind of Hollywood secrets nobody talks about anymore. And before you go, drop a comment. Which of these comedies deserves a comeback? And which one should probably stay buried forever? Buried forever. Buried